From New Mexico is recognized for any questions she may have for the panel.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. A few weeks ago, I stood with my colleagues on the House floor. I stood and I listened, and I thought it was appropriate to stand and grieve and listen to the pain. Like our ranking member, my children are the same age, 25 and 23, my three children in college. And so it is hard to hear of the loss of somebody so promising. And it is proper that we recognize that pain. And we have so much of that pain across this country. You know, so often I have stood on the floor of the House and myself stood up to recognize those we have lost. In that instance, it was for a mass killing where numerous guns were used, automatic weapons. I've stood with friends of mine as their constituents were lost to natural disasters, to other mass murders. And it is our job to look at these horrific events and say, what can we do? And so I recognize that urge to try to do something in the face of loss. But like, I think that the important thing to do is to be careful about what we do and to do it in a thoughtful manner and to do so in a way that recognizes what can be done and what will be effective. I am struck by the fact that this bill has no funding, and I'm struck by the fact that ranking member pointed out that we already have policies for detention, but we don't fund the Homeland Security so that there would be enough detention. I'm struck by the fact that you could get arrested for any kind of misdemeanor and would face that detention, whether or not you were ever charged or not. And by the testimony with regards to what does that mean for people's civil liberties, I'm struck by the fact that there was a border bill. Ranking member, was the Senate bipartisan legislation, would you describe that as something intended to address issues at the border?
It was certainly intended to address the problems at the border. That was its purpose. Most of the Republicans who talked about an open border voted for it. Unfortunately, Mr. Trump, former President Trump, said in so many words, and our colleague, Mr. Nels, said in so many words that that bill shouldn't be adopted by the House because it would solve the problem, and we don't want to solve the problem. We want an election issue, not a solution to the problem. And that's why that bill hasn't been taken up yet.
Yes, so it strikes me that those who care a lot about this issue would be supportive of bringing bipartisan solutions and working together across the aisle on bipartisan solutions.
It is a bipartisan bill. It's a very harsh bill, frankly. I'm not sure I would vote for it.
Yeah.
It's a very harsh bill, and more harsh than the bill that was last considered by the so-called Gang of Eight in 2013, which is 11 years ago, which is the last serious attempt to deal with this problem. As I said, that was the last serious attempt to deal with this problem until this bill, and of course, what we see from our Republican colleagues, not all of them, because some of them
in the
in
House.
Senate.
I mean, Republicans in the Senate described it as one of the strongest border bills that they
Yes,
had
they did.
always worked on.
And what we see from our colleagues in the House is that they'd rather have the issue than a very, in my opinion, very harsh, and the Republican senators' description, very strong border bill.
So Trump said, do not take up that bill because it will not be good for my reelection. And so instead of addressing the issues at the border, by actually taking up the bill and looking at what things we could do over here, it was, as our speaker said, dead on arrival. I also want to, Mr. Chair, seek unanimous consent to enter into the record an article called "The Truth About Illegal Immigration and Crime."
Without objection.
And, you know, as we look at this covers numerous studies that show that actual immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, actually have lower rates of crime because they are very concerned about not threatening their ability to stay in this country. So, I'd encourage my colleagues to review this. And this man deserves to have the harshest penalties available as he's convicted. And I think that that is key, and that is also possible. There is nothing in the present law that will prevent that. There is nothing in the present law that will prevent his deportation, as I understand it, as he is convicted. And so I think that that's something that's important to remember. Ranking Member Nadler.
That's correct. I just want to point out, in light of what you were just talking about, a study from Stanford last year, Stanford University pointed out that the last time immigrants had a higher incarceration rate than native-born Americans, than native-born citizens, was 1870. Today, immigrants are 60% less likely to be incarcerated than native-born citizens. Between 1990 and 2013, the undocumented immigration population more than tripled from 3.5 to 11.2 million, but FBI data indicates that the violent crime rate declined 48% in that period.
And if they are convicted, they are deportable. Is that correct, Mr.
Absolutely. If they're convicted, they are deported.
And
the
they should be.
problem with this bill, with a number of bills that we've seen, is that an arrest or a charge gets someone put in permanent detention. Even an arrest when no one is ever charged. And that's just un-American.
Well, once again, I do believe that the perpetrator deserves to face the consequences and under our laws. And I am very saddened by this loss of life. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman from South Carolina.